Hi, everybody. This is a video called Vocabulary Matters, and it's meant for folks who are learning at home. So digital learners, home learners, kids who are homeschooling, whoever. And it might come in helpful for some of you who are helping your kids along. My name is Ellen Thompson, and I have had a varied background, but I'm kind of some of the usual stuff too. I'm a mom, a wife, a sister. I have a son, Christopher. I am a local goat farmer, believe it or not, and raise Angora goats from which I spin their fiber into fleece. I have a few of my animals looking over the side of that stall right there, and that's my view from my back deck. And through all of that, I've been an educator. I've taught in the classroom, I've taught at the university, I've been an administrator, and now I'm back to being a literacy consultant, and I love it. So this video is about vocabulary and the fact that it really, really does matter. So we're going to talk about three different things. One is what the research says about vocabulary instruction. Two are some guiding principles that you can follow while you're teaching your young learners at home. And then three, what are some instructional moves to try out in a digital or a home environment? So here we go. So the research tells us a lot of things. One thing we do know from the research is that children acquire up to about 4,000 new words per year. We also know that when kids are in school or in home learning situations, they are probably instructed in less than 400 words per year. So therefore, we do know that kids are learning lots and lots of words somewhere, somehow, with us and without us. And we need to keep that in mind as we go forward. We cannot teach all the words. We want to teach the best words. So one of the things we know about words is that they are complex, and that when you are learning a new vocabulary word in particular, you often do not learn that word all at once. There are multiple degrees of knowing it. You might be able to use it in speaking, but you're not sure how to use it in the written form. It's associated with other words that you know. Some words you know better than others. There's a conceptual meaning behind the word that's bigger than the word itself. There's a frequency of use, and there's a register of use. How you say it in your conversations or in your writing is different. We also know that words can have more than one meaning. They're actually polysemic. So words that mean something in the math classroom could mean a totally different thing in the science classroom. They're also not isolated. And that's one of the problems we have with vocabulary instruction is we've treated vocabulary as an isolated event. We give them a list of words, they look up the words, they have a test on the words, they're done with the words. What we really want to do, though, is get those words related to other words. Our brain works on creating schemas. It's like there's a synapse that happens. The word connects to another word in it, and it creates that synapse to it. And so when I think of one word, other words will fall out too. And that's really important, especially for kids who struggle with vocabulary. And the other part of it is knowing a word kind of depends on what kind of word it is. If it's a really, really highly functioning math term, um, I may understand that once I've had all of the math I can think of to have. And the first time I hear it, it won't really register at all with me. So again, depending on what kind of word it is, knowing it will make it easier or harder. So when we think about what elements are needed for good instruction, it's really interesting what the research reports to us. The research basically says over and over again that all instructional methods produce more word learning than no instruction. Well, duh, that makes sense. But what the research always also says is that no one method has yet proven superior. And they also stress that a variety of methods has advantages. So that old get the list, look up the words, take the test over and over and over again for 12 years, no variety there. So we have a limited um, uh, understanding of some of those words at this point in time. The other thing we know is that children need repeated exposures to the words. So Margaret McCowan and Isabel Beck and others have talked a lot about the fact that kids need between 10 and 40 exposures to a word before it becomes theirs. And I would contend that those exposures are real uses. Those are not just look up the word. Those are actually getting that word in a child's mouth and having them actually use it in their speaking and their listening and their talking and their writing. Um, why bother? Like, what's the big deal anyway? We'll just Google it. Well, that's okay for a while, but vocabulary knowledge is directly linked to comprehension of reading. So if you are reading and you have none of the vocabulary of what you're reading, it's going to be really difficult for you to understand it. Every reader, when they come to a text, to a book, brings themselves to it. Now, some kids have huge amounts of background knowledge. They visited Hawaii, they went to the coral beach, they danced on the beach, whatever it was. And so they can read about the big island of Hawaii in a way that I can't, okay? Because they have that powerful background knowledge. They also, with that background knowledge, comes the vocabulary to name it. So, in other words, it's great to have the experience, but you have to link the vocabulary word to that experience. And that's how kids really collect a lot of new vocabulary. The amount of words acquired from context is dependent on the amount of text read and the ability of the child to read it. Now, that is the idea that the more you read, the more vocabulary you are encountering and the more vocabulary you are apt to learn. So think about this. I'm a fourth grader. I'm a struggling reader. I read at a second grade level, maybe third grade level. I'm not reading grade appropriate text. I'm reading below my grade level. And all the other kids in my class are reading at fourth or fifth grade level. Now, what ends up happening there is the words that they are getting from their context is very different than the words I am. So I have to think about, or I want somebody to think about for me, the ways to help me understand and know and value the vocabulary of my age group. We know that a good reader will learn up to 5 times more words than a struggling reader. That's a fact, okay? And that fact has been out there for a long time. We also know that after fourth grade, most words are acquired through reading. So again, if you're a struggling reader or somebody who just doesn't like to read very much, you are not getting that many words being brought into your vocabulary. The other piece that I think is the why bother is that culturally in the United States and other countries, vocabulary knowledge and its usage is an indicator of intellectual ability. Okay, what did I just say? What it means is when I hear you speak and you're using a range of vocabulary that is bigger than, in my head, without even really thinking about it, I say, that kid knows something. And so again, when you're looking for a job, when you're having that interview, when you're trying to speak to other people, this idea of the vocabulary you use is a real indicator of how smart you are. And for me, why bother? Because I want all kids to sound smart and be smart. Um, this one is just setting context again, but the rich get richer. It's that old parable. Children who come to school with less experience and less exposure to, and the understanding of vocabulary and the understandings of their world, their achievement is ever marked by an ever widening loss of understanding. So, in other words, they come in with less and they're given less because of where they are in their education. The gap just keeps increasing. These children have less language to work with when they begin, and as a result, they show less and less understanding of language through their school years. There was a report that came out in the early 90s about the 30 million word gap, that kids in lower socioeconomic groups tended to come to school with 30 million less known words than their age level counterparts. That's a big gap. And so it means that we need to work hard with all our kids to help them understand the importance of language, the importance of vocabulary, and how it can impact everything they do, especially from a literacy standpoint. So a few guiding principles for instructing kids in vocabulary is first of all, select words the kids are going to encounter. Even better yet, they'll encounter them while they're reading. So remember, you bring out the words. We talk about the words a little bit. There's 1, 2 encounters. Then the kiddo picks up the book and starts reading and reads it 2, 3, 4 more times. So now you're adding up the encounters. Remember, 10 to 40 encounters for a child to retain a new vocabulary word. When you share those words out, teach them in relation to other words. The word restaurant comes with menu, waitress, waiter, cook, food, ladle. All of those words, when I say restaurant, just come bubbling out of my head. So I want to make sure that I'm hooking words to other words. And then what you do want to do is have kids relate the new words to their background knowledge. Oh, that was just like when I did that. You want them to make those connections so that they can retain them for new understandings. Another guiding principle is that people often use is to teach words in pre-reading activities to activate knowledge, and then use them again in post-reading discussion, response, and retelling. So I might, if I'm reading a story with a child, I might pick out 5 words that we talk about before we read, and then we read the book together and we notice those 5 words. And then I might say to them at the end, so what's the big deal? Why do you think I chose those 5 words? And then we have a discussion. It can kind of make it very easy. It's a routine that you can use over and over and over again because the words are different, because the book is different, the response will always be different. And kids actually get pretty jazzed by it. You want to teach words systematically and in depth. So if you're doing a unit of study around volcanoes, um, there are going to be a whole lot of words associated with volcanoes. You want to share those big concepts out. You want to talk about them. You want to show them in multiple instances within the books you're reading. You really want kids to understand them. That's getting to the 40 encounters with a word. And the last thing that you really want to trigger is this concept called word consciousness. So by doing all this talk about words, we actually awaken an interest and enthusiasm for words. Kids actually start looking for them. Kids actually notice new words that describe feelings that they've had and they've never had that word to use before. They really begin to show that. And when they do, then you know that when they're reading without you, they are noticing new vocabulary as well too. It's actually word consciousness is actually a researched effect that happens when you do a lot of vocabulary talk and work with kids. So again, I've talked about this quite a little bit, this idea of 10 to 40 encounters with a word before you can begin to make it your own. And again, I think you have to get a little bit messy with words. You have to say them and write them and read them and sing them and do all that stuff. Your understanding of a word will start with no idea at all. I have no idea what you just said to me. And then it begins to narrow in. You begin to, the more you hear it, you get a general sense of the meaning. And then you might know it, but only in one context, only in the math classroom. You can't bring it out into another space. It's only when we talk about this. You have knowledge of the word, but you can't always use it appropriately in all situations. Like I said before, you might be able to read it, but you certainly wouldn't use it in a written statement because that's just not where you are. And ultimately, what you're looking for is a rich, decontextualized knowledge of a word's meaning, its relationship to other words, and its extension to metaphorical uses. What that means is the word is no longer attached to the math classroom. The word has its own orbit, has its own relationship to other words, and I have full control over how I use it. I like to share a story that as I was going through some of my later graduate education, I had a professor who used very large, very long vocabulary words. And since I wanted to be her when I grew up, I began to take note of those because she would say them and I would think, I don't really know what that means. I don't have a clue. And she was talking about literacy. So that's where I've been my whole life, right? I've been taking classes and working with kids and adults in literacy instruction forever. One of the words she used was the word bifurcate. And I wrote that word down and I thought, okay, kind of get what it means. It's two going down two different ways, whatever. But whenever she used it, it just sounded magnificent. She would just, go on and use that word bifurcate. I wrote it down. I played with it in my head. It was probably 2 to 3 years before anyone ever heard it come out of my mouth because I was in that general sense, context bound, not quite ready to use it. And then finally I got to the point where I could say it out loud and I didn't have to mention her name when I said it. But bifurcate is one of my memories of my graduate school work with a very intelligent person. So here's the dilemma. What words to use? You can't teach those 4,000 words in a year. There's too many words. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you're choosing words, you want words that will help grow more words. You actually want, like that word restaurant, you want it to encapsulate all those other words. So when you talk about restaurant, you talk about all the others as well. But restaurant is the word that you're going to single out and really go into depth with. You also want words that are deep with conceptual understanding. So the idea of the concept of trying hard might be named by the word perseverance. Perseverance is a large concept that covers lots of ground. And there's lots of other ways we can talk about perseverance, but perseverance is something I want with my kids that I'm teaching. I want them to persevere through their new learning so that they can just become smarter and smarter and smarter. Um, and you want to choose words that matter. Like there are some like bifurcate, okay? For a second grader, probably not the word. It's probably not it's kind of cool. I like it now and I may have thrown it into a few classes since then, but really it's probably not the word that matters the most. If I'm talking about kids having grit and passion and whatnot, then I'm probably going to use a word like perseverance with my kids because I think it emulates so much that I want them to be able to do so their learning can become fun. Okay, a little bit more on this, and then we'll get into the instructional uh, types, modes for you to use. There are actually 3 types of vocabulary. Now, some people would say there's 4 or 5, but I'm going with 3. This is the work of Isabel Beck and Margaret McCowan. They are definitely some of the 2 of my most loved heroes. They just have done a lot of work with this. Tier 1 words are basic words. They're the everyday words: house, computer, light, shut, door, dog, cat, pony. Okay. Those are words that when you're beginning to learn to read are critically important to the 4, 5, 6 year old. Okay. They're really those basic language words. You're doing a lot with them, sight word vocabulary, all sorts of things to get them to understand those words so that they can get a leg up on their reading. Um, by tier 3, I'm going to skip over tier 2 for right now. Tier 3 is content vocabulary. So again, we're doing a unit on volcanoes and what makes the structure or the land and the continent move like that. Well, there's a ton of content vocabulary around how volcanoes evolve and what happens to the land around them once they do. That's content vocabulary. Science has its own, math has its own, history has its own. Actually, English language arts, literature has its own. Okay, content vocabulary. Usually that vocabulary stays pretty close to the content area. But then there's this other category that's called tier 2 words, and they are the words that truly enhance meaning. They are the words that sometimes appear in content vocabulary but cross boundaries. Okay. Surface tension in a science experiment might be different. It's probably not all that different, though. I was going to say than the surface of an ice skating rink, um, or I surface from the water. So again, you've got these words that will cross between tier 3 and tier 2. Those are words with multiple meanings. Tier 2 words are also words that just enhance meaning. They are the words like perseverance or compassionate or reluctant that actually allow us to talk about our life, our work, our feelings, our understandings in ways, I don't know how else to say it, that just sounds smarter. We're making use of language in ways that really get to the point. Okay. Basic language doesn't do that for us. It's too basic, it's too concrete. Tier two words are a little bit more amorphous. So each type of vocabulary is important, but it's the tier two words that showcase our sophistication with language. It's these words that our students often do not hear or encounter in their lives outside of school. We don't talk with tier two words so much. We read tier two words a lot. So authors use those words because they can so pinpoint an emotion or a feeling that they'll show up in books. But when I'm talking to my buddy about, what I saw on Halloween night, it's probably I'm going to use the word scary, and there's so many more words than scary to use in a story when you're trying to really set the mood and the setting. So again, tier two words are the words that a lot of kids need some help with. So what I put together were 5 instructional moves that can be performed with learning partners. They could be done in school, but they could be done through a digital format, or they could be done at home with a home learner. So I think these are pretty representative of some different moves that you might make. They also will allow you to create kind of a vocabulary routine when you think about it. Routines are great because we sort of know what to do um, without having to think about it too hard. And that always helps me a little bit. It kind of gets me moving. But the vocabulary is the thing that will change, not the routine. So again, kind of follow that along. I think you'll see what I mean. So the first thing is, how do you know what words your learners already know? This is such a dumb question. You ask them, right? That's what you do. Yet most teachers don't ask them. Most teachers hand out the list of words, off they go, and you just know them. And they may have known all the words beforehand. So then what do you learn as the instructor at that point? Not a whole lot. So one of the things we use, again, these are researched uh, examples, is a knowledge rating chart. I just simplified it to KRC, but it's a knowledge rating chart. Basically, you create a chart and you put your new list of words on it, and then you ask your learners to rate their word knowledge. Do I know the word? Yes, no. Can I write with the word? Yes, no. And they just go down and they check the form. And then at the end of using the knowledge rating chart, you can talk with your learner about the results, or you can have your learner talk with somebody else about their results. But you want to talk with them about what they know about words and what they need to know about words. Um, and sometimes I use this as like a pre and a post assessment. Before a unit, I might have some content words that I want them to learn. They check them off. We have a small conversation about them. I collect them back. And then we have our unit of study on volcanoes or whatever it is. And I bring that chart back out at the end and say, would you rate any of these words differently now? And so now you have a self-assessment by your learner saying, yeah, I know what this means. I know what crater is now. I didn't know that before. So again, it's a nice way to capture some of their learning. Here's a really easy one. If I was doing a unit on matter, I might pick some tier 3 words like matter, solid, liquid, gas, and the kiddos would rate them. Words I know, words I think I know, and words I do not know. Remember, for me, bifurcate was in the words I think I know for a long time. And so then again, I could bring this out at the end, and they could rate them one more time and tell me that they do know what a liquid is. They do know they do know what a solid is. They do know what matter is. Here's a little higher level one, and you can see the form has changed a little bit because I'm more interested in a couple more things with my older readers. Here's a one on spaceflight. We go from have no idea to have seen and heard the word. I can tell you what it means, and I can actually use it in talking and writing. Sometimes when I use this particular knowledge rating form, I have the kids flip the paper over and write to me using the words they know. So in this case, conduct, progressed, and precisely would be 3 sentences that would be written on the back. And the goal for that, or the rule for those sentences, are you have to show me that you know the word. You can't just write, I know the word precisely. You have to kind of show the meaning of it within your sentence. Another way that I work with vocabulary is to allow the kids to nominate vocabulary for us to learn. And what I find is that kids just they really like great words. So let them do it. So have your learners nominate a new word from their reading to get to know more deeply. Or perhaps you have a read aloud that's going right now. You both could say, whoa, I love that word. Say it again. Feel what it feels like on your tongue kind of stuff. Let's grab that word, collect them, and then choose several words from those nominations to challenge your learners to actually use. They can share how many times they were able to use the words in their literacy journal. Sometimes I put a tally sheet up, and I even have, and I think I have it right here somewhere. I know I saw it. Yep, I do. I even have one of these that I bought so that every time you say the word perseverance, I ring the bell. They actually love that. It will drive you crazy within about 2 minutes. So just have fun for a while and then take the bell away. Here's a nomination form that I've used with older kids where they actually select the word, where they found it. So this is a science word or a math word, or it was on the playground or wherever it was, what I think it means and why I think this word is an important one to learn. And then draw a picture that'll make sense to someone else. So again, they've taken the time to get to know that word, and they think that word is something that other people should do. Now I might gather these up and have like 10 in a pile, and every couple of days we just pull a new one out. So we may nominate words and then we work with the words. So what you're actually doing here is you're beginning to create a sense of word consciousness. Now, remember, I said that this is a highly researched phase of word learning. Word consciousness is the awareness and interest in words and their meaning. And when kids have word consciousness, teaching vocabulary is a no-brainer. They will do it themselves in a heartbeat. They will be trying out that word bifurcate on anybody who will listen. So again, you're looking for, it's sort of an excitement in words. Here's another way, another instructional mode that you can use. And I've kind of described it before when I was talking about the word restaurant. Words come with other words. So let them show the other words they know. This is called a semantic web. And we might take a word like cities and just web out what other words come with that. Well, you can see we have transportation, business, building, schools, whatever. And then you even have one up ahead, up above, that's even more complex. So in cities, there's factories, suburbs, shops, entertainment. Chicago is a city. So you've got all of these little sub-satellites all around the word. And again, by doing that, you've not only talked with the kiddo about the complexity of the word cities, but you now have begun to unpack things like entertainment and shops and suburbs. So it's a double, triple bang for your buck. I tried this one, and I'll share this with you in the slide deck. But this is a Jamboard, and a Jamboard is really kind of fun to do. A Jamboard is in the Google. If you have Gmail, it's right there. It's in your Drive. If you go to the little waffle board, you can click on it. And if we go out to this Jamboard, don't look at my tabs. It's frightening. I took this Jamboard and I put the word literacy in the middle. So for me, I'll tell you, I'm going to make a semantic web by going over here into the palette, and I'm going to take a sticky note and I'm going to write the word reading, because when I think of literacy, I think of reading. I'm also going to write writing. I'm going to save that one. And then I'm going to put, let me think now, critical thinking. Because it's more than just reading and writing. It's being able to do something with it. Let me change my colors. I want a different color. I have to listen when I'm, sorry. Listening is important for literacy. I need to hear other people's voices. I also do a lot of speaking when I'm thinking about literacy. Okay, and I'm just going to and you can see that they're showing up on the front, and I can move them all around Oops, there you go. There was another one on top of that one. I'm going to pull a blue one and think about analysis. So analysis of the book I'm reading. Okay, and then I might say, let's do this one because we're talking about it. Vocabulary is important, right? If you're going to be a literate person. So now I've got more. So here I'm starting and I'm creating a semantic web. If you do this with your kiddos, it's really kind of fun. They can, you know, they're adding them too. You can, I'll be yellow, you be blue, and you can kind of fill that up, and it's a shared session, and you just share it the same way you do with any other Google Doc. You can go down here and get a link so that anybody on the internet can view it, or you can just put in an email address. You can do it however you want, but it's kind of fun. Let me go back here, and I'm going to go back over here. So the fourth thing to talk about or to think about is, so you do a semantic web, so you do the knowledge rating, so you do all those things with vocabulary, and it all kind of goes, it's gone. So how can you hold on to some of this? So I often use a reading journal or a writing journal, and I just decided, why am I separating them? It's really a literacy journal. So I can put in that literacy journal, whatever I want, that helps me become a better or a more literate person. So you could use a journal itself, a paper journal, you could use a Google Doc, or you could use a digital journal, just to document the understanding of the vocabulary in the books you're reading, and then also to keep track of those knowledge rating charts, nominated words, and semantic webbing of vocabulary. What I like about having a place to keep this is that kids begin to realize that they're learning. They can go back and they can see what they've learned previously, and they can see how that journal is like getting filled up. And I think there's a definite positive in that. I always had my kids in my classroom keep portfolios so they could see what life was like on the first day of school, and they could compare that to life in the middle of school or the middle weeks of school. So I actually went out and looked for a digital literacy notebook, and one of the presentation slide companies has actually put one together for us. And it's fun. And so I made one for us to use. And if you want to use it, you certainly can. I would just ask that you make a copy of it. But here it is. I'm going to go into present mode so you can kind of see how it works. But it's done in a Google slideshow, which is kind of interesting. And as I said before, this presentation company kind of put it all together. Come on, I'm hoping it'll load. There it is. So what you're seeing here is the presentation mode, and you can see that I've written on the top of it to make a copy. It is part of a Google presentation. So if I go to welcome, there you go, it just opened up. There's some directions here that tell you about using the notebook, and I left those there because I think you need them if you're going to do it. But let's go to the reading section. So here's my reading section, and I'm going to open it up, I think. There it is. Okay, and so what I put in there is there's 4 different units that I think I'm going to do with my kids. One is about getting to know story. Another one is understanding theme, learning from nonfiction, and then following characters through a longer story. So as we do this first unit, they can click on there, and they've got a page that's set up for them to use to keep track of their thinking. If you go to vocabulary, same thing. You can see that I started doing that literacy semantic web in here, but I'm using movable, not movable when you're in presentation mode apparently, but movable sticky notes, okay? And if you look at this and it's not in presentation mode, you'll see that here are the sticky notes, and I've just made copies of them, and I've added them to the different pages so that you can use them. And same here with the reading. Let me just see. So if I went to Unit 1, yes, I've got some more sticky notes in there too as well. So again, you can do it. And if you run out of room, like there's not enough pages for me to write all the stuff I want to write, you just duplicate the slide. I think you don't do it that way. You do it through edit. Or you do it this way. You go control, you right click and you take duplicate, and then you just pop in another page. And so you get another one of the page before. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, let's go back to where we were before. Again, at the end of this, you will get a copy of the slide deck, and you should be able to click in on any of these things that I put in here. And as I said before, I left the directions in most places so that you can kind of look at it and get a sense of how you might do it. But if you want to use it just the way it is, go for it. Make a copy. All right, and here's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. This is the importance of read alouds. I know I've been an educator for over 40 years. I know that the best thing I ever did for my own child and for the kids that I worked with and for the undergraduates I worked for, the teachers I worked with, and the grad students I worked for, the best thing I ever did was read aloud. That it's from that use of story and that shared experience that we can do so much. So I use my read aloud in ways that are gentle to the read aloud. I do not want to ask a question in every sentence, but I do want to get as much depth from it as I possibly can. So this routine is about choosing the book you're going to read, and then choosing, 5 books from the next chapter. 5 books, no, I'm sorry, 5 words from the next chapter to share before your reading begins. And you can do it with picture books as well. So you give your kiddos those words, and you ask them to predict what that next chapter or what that book will be about. And then you begin the read aloud. And as you read, I guarantee you, your child or the kids you're with will begin to notice the words are coming up in the read aloud, because you're choosing important words. Remember, you want the big ones. And then from that, I would have them nominate new and interesting words for you to learn. So again, I choose 4 or 5 words before the new chapter. We talk about them before we start to read, and we start to predict what's going to happen next. And then we notice and discuss them while we're reading. And then we might take one of those 4 or 5 and say, let's make this one our word for this week. And so we begin to do more with it. Here's one that we could do, and I'll just tell you right now that the book, and I love this book, is Arnie the Donut by Lori Keller. And what I want you to do is just think about this. I chose these 5 words: conversation, wasteful, inseparable, grateful, discovered. I'm going to be quiet for like less than a minute, but I want you to think about, what do you think this story, this book, will be about? Arnie the Donut by Lori Keller. Conversation, wasteful, inseparable, grateful, discovered. I wish I could listen to your thoughts right now, because you should be like going a mile a minute trying to figure out, what is it that a donut would be grateful for, and how is it going to be discovered? Ooh, wasteful. I don't understand how to use that word in this context. Somebody's talking to each other because it's just a conversation. And maybe there's friends because somebody's inseparable. Not sure. Okay, gonna keep going. So what do you think? All I can tell you is that kids go nutsy trying to figure out what the story is about when they have those few words. And I haven't even shown them a picture of the book yet, okay? But I'll show you. Here's the book, okay? This is Arnie the Donut. He is phenomenal. He is inseparable. He does get discovered. He does talk about not wasting things. And there's definitely a conversation going on around here. And I know there's one more word, but we won't worry about it. It is by far the best read aloud ever. Arnie can make you laugh until you cry, or can make you cry until you laugh. And I have done that with groups of adults. I don't think I've ever read this book to kids. I've only read it to adults. So anyway, it's a great book. Oh, I think we're at the end, because whenever I start showing pictures of me in the classroom, I know I'm getting to the end of the slideshow. This is a much younger Miss T reading aloud to an audience of students and family members. In my classroom in Colchester, we did a writer's workshop. So kids were publishing books all year long, but we always had an author's tea at the end. And when my kids wrote, I wrote. And when my kids picked a book to read out loud to the audience, I had to pick a book to read to the audience too. So there I am, reading my book that I wrote while they were writing in the classroom. I was actually quite nervous. And as you've already figured out, I'm a longtime educator, over 43 years in the classroom. I was a multi-age classroom teacher. I taught grades 1, 2, 3 at the same time. I had my kids for 3 years, which is a gift. It's just a gift. All I can tell you is it's the gift between learning families and learning kids and siblings. It was wonderful. I became a UVM literacy faculty member. And then from UVM, I went back into public education and became a curriculum and technology director in Essex Town. Now I'm back as a literacy consultant with Partnerships for Literacy and Learning. And I'm loving every minute of that too, working with teachers in schools, even though we're doing a lot of Zooming, it's still fun. If you have any questions or you just want to chat, drop me an email at ethompson@pllbt.org. Again, you'll get this slide deck, so you'll get these particular articles, but there's that 30 million word gap. There's a few other things in there about that might be helpful. They might be a little too literacy nerdy, but you might like them. Oh, and I got to get back to my book now. See ya. Bye-bye. Thank you.